You're listening to the Whole Church Podcast, a proud member of the Anazal Podcast Network. Our efforts to educate and unite the church are made possible thanks to our sponsors on Patreon, Captivate, and Apple Podcast. You could join them on one of those networks, or you can support the show by making a one-time tip on our Captivate website down below in the show's description.
Server, you remind us of our Savior's bull and towel. Teacher, you are raising up a child to be kind. Lawyer, give us hope that justice one day will surround us. May God's kingdom come, on earth His will be done.
Ephesians 4, verses 25 to 29 in the Christian Standard Bible. Therefore, putting away lying, speak the truth, each one to his neighbor, because we are members of one another. Be angry and do not sin. Don't let the sun go down on your anger, and don't give the devil an opportunity. Let the thief no longer steal. Instead, he is to do honest work with his own hands, so that he has something to share with anyone in need. No foul language should come from your mouth, but only what is good for building up someone in need, so that it gives grace to those who hear. In the book of Ephesians, St. Paul is explaining what it means to be the church. Before this pericope, Paul wrote that the church is to work together in all our different roles. Here, St. Paul insists that the church builds one another up in word and deeds, and he even ties in our occupational work to this idea. Nick Polk, how do you think the way we, the church, present ourselves in work ties into the idea of building one another up?
I think that being a part of the church is being a part of the world, and being a part of the world is doing work. We got to work to live, and so the way that we present ourselves is a big deal.
Yeah, amen. I would even go as far as to say hallelujah.
Be close to us, Lord, have mercy on us. Lord, please put your hands on us day by day.
Hey guys, welcome to the Whole Church Podcast. Possibly your favorite church unity podcast, possibly not, but if it's not, it's okay. We have your favorite Tolkien expert here. I am thrilled about our guest. He's a return guest you've all come to know and love. He is the one who not only raises the roof, he builds a new roof so that he can raise it too. The one and only teacher, friend, Tolkien scholar, Nick Polk. How's it going? Author.
What's up, dude? I'm totally into tearing down roofs and building up new ones. That's what I do on a daily basis. So I'm excited to do it again. That's his occupational. Yeah. This was a bait and switch on us. We thought he was a teacher, and now we're going to discover he's a construction worker.
Yeah, he actually runs a Habitat for Humanity.
Yeah.
Jimmy Carter who?
Never heard of him.
Oh man. But no, for real, we're here to talk to Nick. You know, this is part of our job fair series. And you guys, Nick does ministry stuff. Well, yeah, kind of. But his day job is being an English teacher at a high school. So we're going to talk to him about the education occupation. That's fun to say together. Education occupation. Okay, anyway. But so you might know him from the book we've reviewed on the show before. You might know his work with the Malorn Publishing. I think I said that incorrectly. It's fine. But today we're here to talk to Nick about what it's like to be a teacher and how our teachers are an important part of the whole church. See what I did there? Yeah. Good times.
Ooh.
Yeah.
You did actually pronounce it correctly as well.
What?
So, yeah.
Yeah, that never happens.
That's wild. Yeah. I'm a podcaster who can't speak. It's a problem.
Yeah. If you want to hear him not speak well on other shows, we actually have a nice convenient link in the show notes to the Anazal Podcast Network website. He's been on pretty much every podcast at this point. So you can hear him mispronounce pretty much everything. There's also a paid subscription for the network on Apple Podcasts where you can get extra content from all the shows in the network, including this one. And I think you should rate the show while you're over there on Apple Podcasts. Yeah. I do.
Yeah, it is.
It brings joy and peace. Mostly
Copper
to us.
agrees. Yeah.
Copper. That was him saying please.
Yeah. Also, I can think of at least one of our shows that I've never been on, which is Friday Night Frights. So maybe they should check that out if they want to hear people who can speak be on a podcast.
Yeah.
They don't have to.
Yeah.
But they could. All right. So without further ado, we start off before anything else with a holy sacrament, Nick. Perfect unity through silliness with a silly question. And for this series, we get to thank Samantha Perez repeatedly because we put the question up on our Facebook of like, hey, what theological topics are discussed in church that you want to see whether or not they're relevant in people's lives or not? And for some reason, she decided to add the question, is a hot dog a sandwich? And it got a lot of votes. So we felt obligated to ask everybody. And so that's just a series silliness. Nick, please give us your wisdom. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
It is not a sandwich because a sandwich is, contents in between two slices of bread or lettuce or onions, depending on your diet. But the hot dog bun is a singular piece of bread. If it accidentally breaks in half and your hot dog's in between, then it does become a sandwich. But because it is a single piece of bread, it is not a sandwich.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So subs to you are not sandwiches.
Not if they are, interesting. If they are not, I guess if they're not cut through, but generally I do think of subs as sandwiches.
Much to think about.
Yeah.
I also just got to throw out there that I feel like Nick's just exposed this question is like Schrodinger's cat. A hot dog is both a sandwich and not a sandwich at the same time. At any moment, those buns can be separated. Yeah.
So it's always a sandwich? Hot dogs are sandwich?
It's a sandwich. Yeah.
Okay.
But we do have a more important question. Do you think that question could be relevant to your life in the slightest?
When you were talking about my reasoning and then you connected it to Subway sandwiches, it just kind of reminds me of how logical reasoning doesn't always translate into experience. So I guess, yeah, kind of.
Shocking, isn't it?
Man, I'm kind of having an existential thing going on with this hot dog and Subway sandwich connection.
Well,
you wait till we start talking about soup
next time you see her.
Soup? Yeah.
Oh, no.
And cereal.
Wait, is cereal a soup? Is that what's coming next?
That's a different series.
All right. Well, speaking of different series, what's not a different series is what we're doing currently. This is... Sorry, that was a terrible transition. This is the whole church job fair. And we have a few different reasons for doing this. We just want to run down every episode in case this is someone's first episode. Every episode is someone's first episode. Our show is primarily listened to, according to our stats and all the smart people that run programs that we blindly trust, primarily listened to by people who attend seminaries who live near big theological hubs. Wheaton, Illinois, Dallas, Texas, we got those things where we're like, okay, we kind of know who's listening. And a lot of times we started the show off and we were like, we want to talk to the whole church, anybody in the church, doesn't matter if they're a pastor or not. But a lot of times we've pretty much just been talking to pastors and professors, and we want to get on the ground. What is the church doing in their daily jobs, in their daily lives? And what are our pastors and seminary teachers missing that maybe they don't see in some of these other occupations? Sometimes we get in our mind, like you're talking about, like that reasoning thing. Sometimes we get in our mind and we're like on theological concepts and we miss what is a day-to-day life actually experienced as. But yeah, so that's why we're doing this. Hopefully it's helpful to pastors and people listening. And also it's just fun to talk to people about what they do. All right, Nick, so we know you have some ministry experience. We know you edit for a Tolkien subscription. You wrote a book. You have your own Substack that we talked about on the show. People, please go to the link in the show notes and check that out. You do tons of other stuff too, but could you briefly break down for our listeners who may not be aware, what is your background with the church, ministry, and all the like?
Yeah, no, this is cool. So my parents did not grow up in households where they went to church. And it wasn't until I was about 5 that my family started going to church, and it was a Church of the Nazarene. And my family got really connected. And not long after that, my mom became the children's pastor. A couple years later, my dad became a Christian. And we just kind of, we lived in a parsonage from when I was in 5th grade all the way through until I graduated high school. And during that time, I felt like I was called to youth ministry because as a teenager, guess what? I was really good at interacting with teenagers. And so, obviously, that was what I should have done. And I went to college in Nashville to get my undergrad in religion/theology. And I did that. And I minored in social work, and it became this hybrid degree called compassionate ministries. And so I was a social worker and then a part-time youth pastor at a local Church of the Nazarene up until about 2019. And then until I decided, and then I got the opportunity to go back to school for education, because I had really enjoyed working with youth, but I did not like working in a church. And so my wife kind of helped me recognize that, had an opportunity to go back to school, went back to school in the midst of I went to work at a university, put in a couple years, started school at the tail end of COVID, and graduated a couple years ago, and active in my local church. I'm no longer a minister, and I am, like I said, I'm a teacher, high school English teacher, and then I do all the Tolkien stuff on the side. Yeah.
I've always thought it would be really fun to be a high school teacher, just because I had a lot of fun in there,
Yeah, it's like you said, it's a little different being on the other side of things, but I really enjoy it and have a good time.
Yeah, I get to bully kids all day, but in like a lovable way.
Yeah. Bullying children is the best. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, how would you describe the faith community that you find yourself in now? You mentioned it a little bit, but
yeah. So, when I was thinking about leaving ministry as a professional endeavor, my wife and I ended up moving into our first house around that same time too, which was quite a distance away from the church that I had formerly pastored at. And so I left the church. We kind of started attending still, and then we left really shortly after. And I had thought about leaving the Church of the Nazarene anyway. And so it just ended up being a nice natural break for us to make. No like issues or drama or anything like that. No hurt. It was just time to move on from that time of my life, that era, I guess. And so we went to a local United Methodist church here in my town, which is about 25 minutes outside of Nashville, a place called Mount Juliet. And been involved there since 2019, like early 2019. And so my wife is involved on the financial committee, and we volunteered in various places, including youth ministry and other places. And now it's an independent, like Wesleyan Holiness Church, after the whole UMC split.
Okay. Interesting.
And so that's where I'm at right now is there. And so, yeah, it's been beneficial. I've got a lot of good relationships, attend pretty regularly. So it's a good place. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a Methodist church. Do you guys have a basketball court?
We do not have a basketball court.
Really?
I know. One of like the first Methodist churches without a basketball court.
That's like the only time I've ever heard of a Methodist church not having one.
The big United Methodist Church in downtown Nashville is literally like there's the church and then they own a gym. Yeah. And that's like where all their income comes from.
Yeah.
See, I just feel convicted for my college football idol worship, because right now, every time I hear Methodist, I'm like, man, Southern Methodist University was just crazy this year.
They were. SMU was nuts.
Blew my mind. Yeah.
But this is our whole church job fair, not the whole church basketball fair. Before getting into anything else, if somehow someone never heard of what it is you do, which is high school English teacher, how would you describe your job, and how would you address anyone who might be interested in pursuing this job?
I just love the idea of someone having no idea what a high school English teacher is.
Teacher.
It's great. Yeah.
So I'm assuming these people speak English. And so I'm going to say, okay, the language you speak right now, okay, when we're speaking English, there's arbitrary rules that we have decided are the rules of English. And teenagers, how much they enjoy being locked up in a single room for multiple hours of the day, doing stuff they don't want to do. Yeah. So you get all them together and you are supposed to instruct these teenagers on the arbitrary grammar rules, through boring grammar instruction, technical stuff. Mm-hmm. And you get to read books, usually books they do not get to choose, that I do not get to choose, the state gets to choose, and they're usually books that are not of the 21st century, but usually the very early 20th century. Pretty good literature, in my opinion. But so that you get to attempt to teach teenagers those things through those various means.
What I find actually weird about this that I hadn't thought about till just now, all the way up until college, like English and literature are the same thing, like it's the same class, and then all of a sudden you go to college and those are two different classes. Do you ever wish that it was two different classes in high school?
Yeah, I think that it would be helpful to have a literature and a language department in high schools.
Yeah, what I really enjoy is like, I'm at a point in my life where I know a lot of people who are like going back and reading books that they either didn't get assigned in school or declined to read in school because they were lazy.
Yeah,
and so every couple of weeks, I see somebody who's like, "Oh, I read To Kill a Mockingbird. It's actually like really good." It's like, I just read The Great Gatsby. It's great. Like,
God, that's always funny.
They're classics for a reason.
Although I will say, To Kill a Mockingbird, and also Scarlet Letter, and also Across 5 Aprils are three of my least favorite books I've ever read. I am not a fan of any of them.
Mm-hmm. That's
especially
fair.
Across 5 Aprils. That book infuriates me to this day.
All right. Yeah, I've never read it. I won't lie.
Don't.
Yeah.
Don't
do it.
I never will.
No, it is interesting because when I was a kid too, I hated reading in high school. I don't think I read an entire book throughout my middle and high school career. And like I said, and I was one of those kids who was like, I don't need books. And now I teach English. Yeah.
That's crazy. I was middle school and high school. I was borrowing books from the school library and the town library.
So awesome.
Yeah. I hadn't really fully finished a book until I think it was it Lassie? What am I thinking of? One of those.
Dog?
Yeah.
Lassie the dog?
Yeah.
Saves the
That's
boy
the first
from the
thing
well.
That's the first thing I ever read. And then at one point in my life, someone was like, "Hey, I think you have ADHD. You should try doing some ADHD related things." And then all of a sudden I loved reading. It was wild.
Yeah. Once I found out I was undiagnosed ADHD, it helped a lot. Yeah.
It's crazy how that works.
Yeah.
But if someone was going to you though, then they were like, "Hey, when I grow up, I want to be an English teacher." Would you be like, "Yeah, man, it rocks," or would you be like, "Don't, that's stupid"? You know what I mean? Like a lot of pastors, if you ask them, they're like, "If you can do anything other than be a pastor, and your spirit will let you, don't be a pastor." Like, would you say like the similar thing, or do you like, nah, teaching rocks?
I love teaching. I think that I can understand, especially if people do it fresh out of college and get burnt out, because when you are in your early 20s, you don't have experience. And so you let, no matter what it is, whatever work environment exists, systems will take advantage of you. Right. And so when you're younger, you're like, I just got to put in my dues. And nowhere is that, the education is known for that type of stuff. And I think a lot of people who are younger, who are like, oh, I'm like 35 and I've been teaching since, college, and now I'm like burnt out. I think they set a precedent for themselves that was unrealistic. And so being a second career, I was able to come in, and I don't participate in the arbitrary nonsense that a lot of people get roped into, and try to focus on being a better teacher and the content that I enjoy. And I think if you can keep those two things in mind, and you enjoy working with kids and want to educate kids, I think that it's really, really enjoyable.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are some things that are normal in your occupation that others might not think about?
Oh, just the constant improvisation of literally every aspect of life. Like, classrooms are not just, okay, sit down, listen to my lecture and do this work. It's a kid comes in and they start just crying out of nowhere. What do you do in that situation? No explanation, no talking to you, just pure tears.
Straight to the nurse.
Yeah. And, what happened? What do you do? What happens when a kid straight up stands up and yells in your face for no reason that you can tell, right? And what do you do at that point? And then also, sometimes kids may talk to you about other personal issues, So so all this stuff is just improvisation, or, go into instruction. What happens when you're trying to teach kids how to read and you find out that one kid who's a senior in high school has been faking it his whole high school career and literally cannot read? So at that point, what do you do? Yeah. What do you do?
Send him to the guild.
Teach him about
guild. Like it's an actor. Yeah. You straight to the Screen Actors Guild.
Go make more money than all of us.
This is probably a really weird question. For context, for anyone watching, listening, Nick Polk, in my mind, is also the official dungeon master for all D&D games, Theology Beer Camp related. You're talking about improv. Do you think does D&D help you be a better teacher? I know that's such a weird question, but I'm like, improv, the situations you're coming up with, it's like, to me, I know it's like the characters are different, but it's not wildly different from, you're on your quest and then boom, an orc's in your face. What do you do?
Right. No, I think so. Especially listening to, the recent systematic geekology session on D&D, from Theology Beer Camp.
Nice plug.
It was pretty good. You're welcome. Whole Church Podcast, rate and review, subscribe. But I think in the same way they talk about spiritual formation, but I think he brings up education. Tom does, who did the lecture on D&D. And I think so. I think the improvisation would really help you in the classroom as a DM or even just a player.
All right. Well, the other thing, so we've noticed when we were talking about our own day jobs with food and stuff, or even when I was at Shutterfly, I worked with photos, like sometimes the job world, you have your own language, right? For TJ and I, it's not weird when he says something and I'm like, heard. He knows what that means. Everyone around us is like, what? Huh? That's weird. Or they think I'm being rude because I'm just sharp. And why don't you just say you're carrying a knife, dude? So but that's just the language of the kitchen. Is there something similar in your occupation that's this is the language of teachers that maybe someone else would be like, huh? Why'd you say it like that?
Yeah, it's really just acronyms. So many people just speak in acronyms. When I first started and people are like, oh, and acronyms related to numbers and letters. And people are like, oh, 504s and, random educational lingo. And so you're really, you kind of after you first start, you hear someone say, oh, the TCUUI or whatever. And you're like, what? And then you're like, oh yeah, totally. The TCUUI. Right, of course. Then you go and Google it immediately. And you're like, oh, okay. I know nothing about my job.
I was thinking about Googling it while you were saying.
I actually just made up that acronym. There's no really TCUUI.
But funny, I follow up with so what does tuberculosis have to do with teaching? And you're like, what?
Yeah.
Good thing I didn't Google it.
But So for the meat of these episodes, we are going to walk through 12 big theological topics that are often debated. Theologians, podcasters, pastors, we've talked about these things before to see how these ideas actually impact people's everyday lives. So we're going to run through 12 topics our Facebook group voted on as the biggest theological hot topics of our time. We need you to tell us if you find the topic relevant, not relevant, or especially relevant. Or if you've never heard of it. Afterwards, we're going to pick 1 to 3 of the topics to discuss further. So
cool.
Yeah. So soteriology, the nature of what it means to be saved.
Relevant.
Free will versus predestination.
Relevant.
Yeah, I loved to exert free will in the classroom.
100%.
Yeah. Atonement models.
Irrelevant.
Continuationalism versus cessationalism in regards to gifts of the Spirit.
Relevant.
Christology.
Relevant.
God's nature.
I would say especially relevant. Sorry. Both of those especially relevant.
Social justice.
Especially relevant.
The doctrine of Imago Dei.
Especially relevant.
The nature of Scripture.
Especially relevant.
Ecclesiology and missiology.
Relevant.
Demonology and angelology.
Irrelevant.
And eschatology.
Relevant.
All right, so I like that a lot. I like that. I mean, I feel like you could make any of these things relevant in a classroom if you chose to, but you know.
Totally. I teach mythology and I bring up demonology and angelology all the time.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's a fun topic.
It is.
You're like, actually.
All right, kids.
Really
today's
specifically.
We're reading the Goes Horatio, whatever it's called.
Yeah. Every time I teach Gilgamesh, it becomes suddenly really real.
This is a severed head, and this is a pentagram.
This is sigil class for the next week.
Sigil class, yes.
All right. So, Nick, of the 12 that we just listed, if you had to pick 1 or 2, let's go with 2. You got to pick 2 of the above theological topics that you think are relevant to your day-to-day life. Just to talk a little bit more about what 2 would you pick
out of that whole list?
Yeah.
Wow. On a daily basis, I'm going to go with ecclesiology. Hold on. Look at the list again.
12 is a deceptively large list.
Yeah.
Also, we tied ecclesiology and missiology together, so it's kind of a cheat. You get to pick both as one.
Yeah, I'm into that.
You want. Yeah.
And then I'll do free will versus predestination.
Ooh, fun.
All right. So
I'll just say, let's start with the first one. Missiology, ecclesiology, how is that relevant in the day-to-day life of a high school English teacher?
Yeah. The way that I think of ecclesiology, because I am a religious pluralist, I think that the ecclesia or the kingdom of God or the church is a metaphor for just being a being in the cosmos, not even just a human, but next to all created beings. And so what is the nature of being a person that lives in cooperation with our friends, our neighbors, our enemies, whatever that looks like. And usually, no matter which community you come from, religious or non-religious, usually people are trying to generate some sort of harmony. And so in the classroom, trying to figure out first, I could try to keep it subject-based and try to make it cross-disciplinary, because a lot of people who are like, why are we learning this? How is this relevant to math or history? I teach in American literature class, and we start things off by literarily analyzing the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. And kids are like, why are we learning history and English? And so I try to really bring those two together and then expand that to be like, okay, as a person, we don't just categorize our lives, really. We might need to just for organizational sake, but our lives are intermingled. messy, connected. And so if that's the reality of our world, how do I be a good teacher in encouraging cooperation and balance between all that?
All right. And now I'm trying to remember the other one. That was so good. Man, what is the other one he said?
Sorry, free will, predestination.
Oh yeah. Okay, break that down. Like high school English teacher. Why does that matter to you?
Yeah, mythology, which is a class I get to teach, which is Greek mythology particularly, which is very fun. But that question is not just a Christian one. It's rooted in, Hellenistic philosophy and the ancient Greeks. And of course, ancient philosophers such as Confucius and others also dealt with that sort of stuff. That's a pretty universal human question, I feel like, philosophically and religiously. And so being somebody who has free will proclivities, as opposed to predestination or determinism, there are things that are determined in our life. We do not get to choose where we're born. We don't get to choose what era we're in, and to a large degree, right? Life thrusts us into things. I can't grow feathers and fly, that sort of thing, right? And so there are things that are determined for me that I get to respond to. And so trying to bring those types of questions and that type of framework into the curriculum, whether it's a novel or a Greek myth or even grammatical rules, right? These rules are given to us. We don't really get to decide how English functions, except sometimes we do, like when brain rot becomes a word, in the dictionary or whatever.
Yeah, that's fine.
But yeah.
Or truthiness.
Oh yeah, truthiness.
Colbert. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, no, and what I love that you're getting at there too is just how everything's kind of interconnected. And this is where my math brain with theology, I'm like, what do you mean? Everything's relevant, but I have to remember that not everyone is me. But I'm hearing what you're talking about of this openness, kind of with free will, and then I'm like, okay, that makes perfect sense knowing what I know of how Will thinks of eschatology. Because I know that Nick is universalist light, and that has to do with him thinking about this free will thing. That also has to do with what he thinks of the characteristic of God, of being an open theist. And that also probably goes back to your thing about ecclesiology being important, because you think that all of this stuff is open, and it's oh yeah, it all kind of ties together a little bit.
And even psychologically, and psychologically, if people feel like they're in control of their lives, you're happier, you make more money, which isn't the end goal, but more money means you get to pay your bills and stuff. And so anyway, that's also something I want kids to feel like they have a say in their own lives, even in the structures that you were talking about and I was talking about that we don't get to decide, but yeah.
Right. And that also is going to be what makes this challenging for church unity, tied to the main theme of our podcast, is that's why, for those wondering, sometimes you get all these big church divisions and you're like, why are they arguing about, this angel thing? And it's well, it's because their view of an angel has to do with how they believe God treats predestination, which has to do with how you think salvation works, which has to do with whether or not you're a Christian at all. And it's so even the minor things, if you pull at the thread, they are minor, but also there's a reason it's causing division, and it actually is a little bit more complicated than people think. Yeah.
So, is there any one topic in the list that you think is particularly irrelevant?
Particularly irrelevant. I'm trying to think of which ones. I'll pick an easy one. I picked a demonology and angelology, and not because Josh said it, because because there are people who it is interconnected.
Yeah.
And I grew up believing in angels. It's kind of part of the cultural zeitgeist. There's movies about angels. There's, guardian angels.
Lucifer.
Right. Totally. Yeah.
The Good Place.
Absolutely. What's the one with Henry Rollins? That's 10 years old, 15 years old. You know what I'm talking about? He plays a fallen angel.
Totally.
I can't
Little
remember.
Nicky, Adam Sandler.
Oh, Little Nicky, come on. Yeah, 100%.
Classic. I watched that movie last week. What a good movie.
Chicago freaking rules, dude. I don't remember what he says, but when they play Chicago backwards, it's awesome.
Popeye's chicken rocks.
Well, that's like, man, I wish I remember which church fathers had some of these debates, but like that's where you get some of the weird things. And I'm going to tie this to Emperor's New Groove, where like you get like, Crunk with the angel devil thing. It actually, that's like a silly cartoon cliche now that started off as some theologian had an idea that everybody argued about. Does everyone have their own personal guardian angel? And that basically had to do with whether or not you thought God was omnipresent, and then blah, 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 blah. Arguments happened. And then someone will, well, then why do people do evil if everyone has their own angel? Why wouldn't he just guard him from the evil? It's like, well, because there's also a fallen angel that follows him around. And then they developed this, I think it was Thomas Aquinas who did this actually. Shame on him for being stupid. But good and devil angel on your shoulder came from that argument that eventually fleshed out into, now we look at it and we're like, that's silly. But if you follow the string, you're like, okay, I see how you got there. It's still silly. At some point, someone sort of stopped and said, wait a minute, we've taken this too far. And now we have really amusing things with Crunk and Emperor's New Groove. So I guess I'll take it.
Yeah, that's okay. True. Go ahead, TJ.
No, I wasn't going to say anything nice.
No. Well, I mean, as you know, I'm reserving myself. But I think it's just a lot of those people were dealing with the way that cosmology was conceived back then, too. And like the way that we do theology interacts with the way that we understand the world scientifically, and angelology and demonology does not make sense in the science. That's the current rendition of our scientific understanding of the world. But I am open to things being in this world that are unexplainable, and people do have real experiences with what we would call supernatural things. But, for me, I'm more naturalistic in that sense. And this is, I'll make it relevant just because why I think it's irrelevant is kind of similar. Like I can eat a banana and it is healthy for me. Somebody who is allergic to bananas will eat a banana and have an allergic reaction and either have a rash or a problem or die. Okay. So I think there are some areas in the world, elements in the world that are unexplainable, that some people have negative or positive, what we would call spiritual experiences, and some who either don't have that experience. So yeah, that's how I try to think about it. But I think actually thinking that angels and demons are real and having a real material impact on our lives, I think should be phased out. Yeah.
I'm gonna slightly disagree.
I like it. Do it.
Not heavily disagree. I'm pretty sure I've saw angels once, but I also I know how the human mind is, so I'm like, I don't always trust everything I think I saw, especially if no one else saw it. But I remember I had one spiritual moment where I was just overwhelmed by all the pains in the world, and for some reason seeing that at that moment really helped me. And the thing is though, I didn't have a really fleshed out theology of angelology and what I believed about angels. I was just in this moment concerned with all what was going on in the world, and then seeing that allowed me to have some comfort of there is some good presence out there, and that's where I'm maybe relevant, maybe. I also could just be crazy, and maybe if I just had a better theology of God being omnipresent and in all things, I wouldn't have needed to see angels. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see God in this Honda flat.
So that's a nice Chili's callback.
So what would you rather the church and our pastors or theologians be focusing on than angelology? What good could have been done in the world if Thomas Aquinas had just stopped writing? Just put down the pen.
So much
crap. I try to read what you've written, and there's literally so much. It's like trying to read Aristotle. Good God.
Yeah. Okay. Quick. Yeah. Here's my good that could be done if Thomas Aquinas didn't write. Less people would have believed in his crazy version of just war theory. Less churches would have justified violence. Nazis might not have been backed by the church as much. I think it would have been pretty big if he would have just stopped writing. Could have been great.
Heard it here, folks. Thomas Aquinas, the reason for Nazism.
I don't know why. That's just like an ongoing gig. We're just like, we just don't like that guy.
I've heard that many times. Yeah, Southern Baptists and conservative Catholics are coming after you, dude. They're coming after you.
Which we're going to have a conservative Catholic on in like 2 weeks. But
yeah,
he knows
TJ is shaking in his boots. Yeah.
I'm shivering me timbers.
Oh, man.
Xerxes. Okay, I won't go there. Sorry, South Park reference.
Listen, I think that we also could have greater church unity if Catholics would just denounce Thomas Aquinas.
So agreed wholeheartedly.
Again, it's whole church except for that guy. That really, we're going to change the subtitle.
I love that all of y'all are Aquinas haters. Like, I also am like a 95% Aquinas hater. There's like 5% of Aquinas, and I'm like, that's pretty cool. That's pretty legit. 95% of them can go away.
Yeah,
just like Calvin, you know.
This is why we're starting our Nick Polk cult.
Yeah.
That's a reference to systematic ecology. You guys have to watch the Dead Space episode to get that reference. But
Ooh, so what should the church be talking about instead of?
Oh yeah.
That's
I was talking with some friends about this, and it kind of has to do with like Imago Dei, Christology stuff, and sometimes that stuff can get really abstract. And I think one of the things that I am more orthodox than a lot of Orthodox Christians are, which I don't really like put a whole lot of stock into that because I'm totally fine with being a heretic. Like, it doesn't really matter to me. But one of the Orthodox things I think is so important is that God is incarnate in Christ materially throughout eternity, infinity, however you want to put that, which means that both directions of time, there was not a point where God was not incarnate. Okay. And so what people are like, oh, God was just kind of floating in the ether and then decided to like randomly become Jesus. It's like, actually, there's a moment of history where that happens, but ultimately God and materiality have been intertwined forever, which means that the material world and the gospel and the work of Christ and the kingdom of God has been going on since the beginning of the cosmos and will continue to go on until the end of the cosmos, if there even is an end to the cosmos, which means that our real work is relevant, and that Christ is all in all. Yeah.
Man, I love Christ is all in all is one of my favorite theological catchphrases. That'd be a fun series. Favorite theological catchphrases. Just all shorts though. But anyway, Nick, we believe here at the whole church that everyone sees the world through different eyes. We want to get pulling some Levinas here, but in all seriousness, we're the whole church. Everybody has all these different perspectives. But is there anything that you think in your work that you see as a high school teacher that our pastors, church leaders, and theologians who might be listening to the show could benefit from seeing for themselves or learning more about from people like yourself or other high school teachers?
Stop trying so hard to convert people. And what I mean by that, if we're talking about unity, is I'm not talking about promoting things that we think are valuable or bring goodness into people's lives. But just in a similar way where I do yoga and somebody does Pilates, there's different benefits, but I'm not going to be like, you need to get rid of those Pilates, dude, because if you do those Pilates, your body is going to be wrecked and you're going to die. Not true. It's kind of a bad example, but I'm trying to think of a good like analogy there. But I think in the classroom, there's a benefit to not focus on trying to convert kids a certain way. Now, there's going to be biases that everyone has that you bring into the classroom, and our system is set up to like instill certain biases about topics like the American excellence, for an example. But I think that focusing on just, okay, how do we try to bring about the best qualities in an intellectual and personal aspect of a child so that when they grow as an adult, so, as a person in general, And I think that's something that pastors could do, or people in ministry. And I think they do. I think they largely do. And I think they find that rooted in scripture and the gospel. But I think that they need to be like the whole church podcast. Be open. Not everyone speaks the same language.
Yeah. And also, I think it's important for people to just remember, as a former teenager, kids in high school, they're living life pretty much as raw as possible.
Right.
Like everything that happens to them is happening for the first time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like they just get it full. And they have to learn how to deal with it. And no one sees that more than teachers, I think.
Oh, man. And even still with teachers, and pastors do this too, is that you get so disconnected from your experience from the past, where I think a lot of pastors or theologians or whoever, they have such a hard time working with people on their spiritual journeys. And then the same thing when, it just happens. You get older and people are like, this generation and these young whippersnappers, I never, damn kids and their music. And it's like, literally that will be forever. And so I think just like you said, the only way to like possibly not lose sight of that is to, like you said, be kind of steeped in it and recognize that raw experience. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. So are there any questions you think we might have missed that people might want to know about you or your work?
I think that maybe a question of like, where does, I think like directly, like explicitly, like where does my faith come into it? Like we're asking all these questions about it, right? Yeah. About my faith. But I think a lot of people are like, oh, I have a calling to be a teacher and I'm going to do God's work, which means I'm going to try to bring the gospel in the classroom in the most covert way I can to save souls. And I just think that approach, while understandable where it comes from and the good intentions, I think is the wrong way to go about it because of the various things we've talked about. If you're going to be a teacher, now if you're at a Christian school, different. But if you're in a charter school or a public school, you're going in there with an ulterior motive, then nurturing the whole aspect of the kid through education, you should probably take a step back and reevaluate if you want to be a missionary or an evangelist rather than a teacher.
Yeah, man.
I was thinking something like, do you really mess with the seating chart on purpose?
Those bastards. Oh, sorry.
Oh, man. Well, anyway, Nick, one thing we usually do before wrapping up, we like to ask our guests if they could provide a single tangible action just for something practical people could go do, what it would be. But for this series specifically, we want to know, what could anyone in the church, lady or ministerial, what could they do to help someone in your occupation, in their daily life? Teachers are a part of the church. What can the church do to help our teachers?
My church in particular sponsors our county or our district schools through like meal programs because we've got a lot of kids who are poor. So I think just working with teachers or educators, no matter if it's private, public, or charter, and seeing what the needs of teachers and students and families are, and build a relationship and see what they need and try to work with people to, bring those needs and bring the kingdom of God in that way.
What changes in the world at large if churches start supporting teachers more?
I think there's just an inherent value that people feel like, I think we all have complicated relationships with religion, and us here, the church. But when people have a sincere desire to build a relationship and help people, there's something attractive to that. And there's something that just like, I know for me, I'm supported in that way through my church. And I feel like I have a value and that my career is desired.
Yeah. I like it.
It's true. So before we wrap up, we like to ask everyone to share a God moment. And that could be anything. That could be a moment of worship, challenge, blessing, whatever it may be. I always make Josh go first. So, Josh, do you have a God moment for us this week?
Yeah, I got a weird one. I love the weird ones.
Excellent.
I got a Steam Deck for my birthday. And
ooh,
I got a couple new games, but what I've been enjoying the most is playing the original version of Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories. And yeah, I'm a huge Kingdom Hearts nerd and everybody knows it. I have a Substack about Kingdom Hearts. Wow. But there's just something about like it not being the remastered version where the songs are better and the graphics are updated. And it's like, no, this is actually the original kind of crappy Game Boy version with like the Game Boy music. And I'm like, I love this so much. I literally just sat there doing my homework with like the Game Boy version of Kingdom Hearts song going on. And I'm like, yeah, just keep playing. I'm not going to hit start. Don't worry about it. And for me, what clicked in my head was this is why my grandpa loved the King James Bible. It was the retro Bible. Like, because I remember talking to him and it wasn't like he ever thought this was a better Bible. It just, for him, there was something there that clicked. And I'm like, oh, this is what it is. And also from now on, I'm referring to the King James as the retro Bible. Yeah. But that's my God moment.
All right. Mine is maybe less silly. I don't know. It's definitely a challenge. For those of you who don't keep up with the NHL, instead of All-Star Weekend, they've decided to do the Four Nations Face-Off this year, which is perfectly timed politically, because now we get to watch the United States hockey team play the Canadian hockey team. And they're like booing the national anthem. And it's honestly, it's kind of hard to experience. It's genuinely difficult to think about. Like, it's no longer a fun way to get away from everything. But man, politically charged hockey is so good. That's why Miracle on Ice is so good.
I've seen some clips of the fights that have been taking place, and they look awesome.
Yeah. 3 fights in 9 seconds.
It's fantastic for hockey.
Yeah. But it is really difficult. And the final is Thursday.
Yeah.
For you guys, this episode won't be out by then.
Now, if Thomas Aquinas wrote Just Fighting for hockey, do you think it would be just as bad as his Just War?
Yeah. Yeah, I do actually. Yeah, and probably. I could go very in depth into that. But we don't have time for that. Yeah.
Probably.
So,
Nick,
do you have a comment for us?
Yeah, we've got this new series at church where it's just talking about God kind of having you move, and just felt kind of called to do something in my community. And so just kind of had a moment where earlier this year he kind of did like an altar call, and I hate those. I find them very performative, but it was one of those movements of the spirits, and it created empathy in me where I was like, this is symbolic of me getting off my butt, and hopefully that translates spiritually to my daily life. Yeah.
We're Pentecostal. We like.
Yeah. You lost us. The altar call. That's how
I used to love altar calls, and
I do think sometimes there's a performative stuff. Like I love some altar calls.
That's pure cynicism. That's not me actually judging them. That's pure cynicism, and like something I have to work out personally. Yeah.
Even when we disagree, Nick makes me just feel so nice. I don't know. He's just too kind.
Here's the thing. I love the spirit of Pentecostalism. If there's something more punk rock than Pentecostalism, I don't know if there's something else. It just makes me uncomfortable. Yeah. Unless I'm at a punk show.
That's why Aaron Simmons is Pentecostal, I think. Specifically that reason.
So if you like the episode, please share it with a friend, share it with an enemy, share it with the cousin. Share with all your cousins. One big happy whole church family. If you're listening on the Anazel Ministries or Anazel Podcasts YouTube channel, hit like, hit subscribe, pretty please. Also hit the bell so you know when we upload new episodes.
Yeah. Also, check out some of the other shows on the Anazel Podcast Network. We mentioned systematic ecology a few times. It'd be cool if you check that show out. Or if you go to the website, you just see whatever one's newest and check those out. Usually it's systematic ecology first because they release a lot of episodes. But if you're listening on like the weekend, you'll probably get some Brandon Knight stuff. And everything he does is cool. We love Brandon. Yeah. Brandon, we love you. Yeah.
I love you, Brandon.
Yeah. We do love Brandon. So we hope you enjoyed the show. Next week, we're going to be joined by Ryan Does, the host of Skipping Church and Across the Bifrost, and a merchandiser for a regional bread company, which probably the most impressive of the three. After that, Jared Kuntz, Joshua's uncle, who is a devout Catholic and a strategic account manager for Spectrum, will join us to keep this series going. And then Kristen Tideman, the co-owner of Tidyco, famous organizers of Theological Beer Camp, will join us to discuss her job and how her faith tradition impacts her daily life as an event planner. And at the end of season 1, Francis Chan is going to be on the show.
Yeah, probably. If someone tells him. As soon as he hears Nick Polk's voice commanding him to join, he'll immediately be part of the cult and start hosting the show.
That's true. That's all I got.
Yeah, Francis Chan. Get in there. Get in there. Get in here.
Oh, man. All right, guys. Thank you all for listening. Later. Thank you for listening to the Whole Church Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. Remember, you can always sponsor our efforts to educate and unite the church on Captivate, Patreon, or Apple Podcast. If you're not into the subscription thing, again, you can leave a one-time tip on our Captivate website down below in the description notes. Thank you again, and please come back next week.